Just
water
when
loss
you-
management. I'll tell you what,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
you want to sit there?
Yeah, I'll sit here. I just want to work the mouse and I need my thing. Sorry. Alright, thank you.
I'll stay. I'll stay.
Sure.
Right, Your Worship, there is the topic. So,
Thank you, everybody.
if you're agreeable, we'll get
Yep.
on with it.
Rip into it.
Yes.
Thank you and good afternoon. So these slides will be talking about Council's request to reduce the targets for the percentage of real water loss and also that of the average consumption of drinking water. Staff accepted that change, but also noted that there would be a need to review the indicators as well as the methods of measuring those indicators in future LTPs. This specifically also to align with the regulator's new network environmental performance measures. These have been issued in June last year, and they are still being refined. The measures that deals with water loss by the regulator, water loss and water use efficiency is listed as noted. Now, our council level of service indicators for water loss management are all based on real losses that are calculated from minimum night flow monitoring in winter time on 25% of the network each year. Therefore, none of those indicators are really annual indicators because 75% of the data is not really current. Also, water loss percentage is not really a useful tool to compare water loss. And as such, it's not included by the regulator to be a performance measure. However, infrastructure leakage index is an international best practice measure that determines how well a distribution network is managed for the control of real losses. And what it is the ratio between volume of real losses and volume of unavoidable losses. Now, if that ratio is more than 8, the water loss management thrust says that such a zone should receive urgent or high priority for reduction of leaks. If it's between 4 and 8, then it is known that efforts should be intensified to reduce leaks, but it would be tolerable where water is plenty and cheap. For between 2 and 4, there's opportunity to improve, but the improvements in that case would be related to things like pressure management and maintenance procedures. Where if it's less than 2, then it really does become uneconomical to do any further leak reduction. Our average consumption indicator is calculated by taking our system input volume less the real losses and dividing that by the total population served. It therefore includes commercial consumption and is not really a good measure for your water use efficiency. The diagram on the slide shows the water balance model, and in green it highlights what Council is actually monitoring. On the right-hand side, we show the 4-yearly cycle for night flow monitoring and how we calculate real water losses. Whereas, because Council is now for the first time in a long time increased the frequency of residential customer meter reads, we are actually now able to approach the water balance from the right side, or actually the left side. And we are able to calculate an annual non-revenue water. If we were further able to get a handle on our unmetered water use or reduce unmetered water use, we would be able to have an annual indication of total water losses. This graph shows, since 2004, the inputs that are used to calculate percentage real water loss. So the black dotted line shows the tremendous increase in the percentage over the past several years. However, if we look at the bottom orange section, which shows the actual volume of real losses, we note that for the past 3 or so years, the volume has stayed very much the same, but the increase in the percentage is due to the success of our water demand management program, excess water use charges. The graph also shows in yellow, which isn't very clear, but it also shows the yellow part represents the current water losses for that particular year, those that was actually measured in the year. The rest is rolled over from previous years. The black horizontal lines are the unavoidable water losses, and that's more or less 25% of our volume of losses measured. We've also now managed to calculate our non-revenue water for FY22 and FY23. We need to look at our FY24 figures in order to get an understanding of why there was an increase in 23. If we however look at our infrastructure leakage index of the 182 water loss zones, we see that 15% of those zones, that represents about 10% of our network, really needs to receive high priority for fixing of leaks. We can also improve our efforts in another 35% of the network. Our average ILI is 4.35, and it's just within the orange band. And that is why Christchurch is still in the top 10 in terms of ILI comparison. When we look at the monitoring over the past 5 years, when we look at the night flow monitoring that has occurred over the past 5 years, we see that a lot of the high red ILIs have been picked up last year. Now, unfortunately, last year was also the year that we weren't able to repair the leaks in time to renew the night flow monitoring results. And it would really be prudent in future to go back and revisit the night flow monitoring so that we could see the improvement before the next cycle, which in this case would be FY27. This graph also shows the ILI that's been calculated per zone, where we saw that a lot of those red zones were identified last year in Ferrymead and West. The graph also shows the percentage of renewals done in the past 10 years in comparison with the total length of pipe in each zone. What's interesting on the graph is that Rafferty zone has one of the lowest ILIs, not just last year, but also previous monitoring. And that could really be because of the pressure management that was done in Rafferty, the many sub-main renewals that were completed, as well as now the latest deployment of the smart water network in Rafferty. So as I noted, our average consumption data includes commercial consumption. If we abstract commercial consumption from the calculation, we see in light blue on the graph that we actually are able to meet the target. Now, this is substantiated if we look at it another way and we determine consumption based purely on residential water meter data. The graph here shows the last 3 years of data, with the blue and the grey reflecting consumption, average consumption per property, and converted in green to consumption per person. Again, it shows a very good picture of improved water use efficiency. This is again confirmed when we look at our peak day demand, and we are very glad that we are surprised though that even though we've increased the property allocation, in July 2023, we have not seen an increase in peak day demand in the past summer. So that's a very good thing. We have, however, seen a slight increase in peak instantaneous demand in the past summer. So it is, so it's good. So it's well understood that a multi-pronged approach is needed for water loss management. Our efforts firstly focuses on better monitoring, and we do to improve data relevancy and prioritization. We do that through improved meter management, through improving customer meter reads, through deploying smart customer meters, by our smart water network deployment, by having a project that will look at dedicated filling stations that are metered so that we can account for unmetered takes, and our future plan to rezone the water supply areas into smaller zones and potentially with smaller district metered areas. Secondly, we should support our night flow monitoring by better leakage control, especially for the red zones, the high ILI zones. We can always do better by fixing our leaks, and staff is actively working on improving contractor management, better systems to monitor progress, and we will certainly be looking at increasing the cycle of monitoring so that we can show the improvements earlier than every 4 years. And lastly, of course, asset management targets our renewals to the right places. Looking at the last 3 years of leak detection data, we see that private leaks has the highest volume, but of course, if they are identified, they are not included in our annual real losses.
So these are, the next couple of slides is going to focus on pipe condition. So a question was asked regarding has the pipe condition overall improved over the past number of years. So this slide shows, it's taken from our asset management plans. So you can see from 2021 to 2024, the number of grade 5 pipes, which is the worst grade, has slightly increased. So that's just, that will answer that question. We have gone slightly backwards. How do we manage the risks? So obviously we class our pipes in terms of criticality. So any pipe with a high criticality, we do not we do not sweat. We will go and replace that. So those grade 5s that are remaining would be the pipes of low criticality that are of lower risk. So when we come to our renewals, we prioritise and focus on those ones that have a high consequence of failure. The next slide, I've included this to show that, which is facing probably around New Zealand, you'll see that there's a number of pipe materials out there that are nearing the end of life, which is why we're getting a bow wave occurring. In the long-term plan, we have budget increasing in 2032 to look to address that bow wave, and that will continue for approximately about 5 years and then start to drop off and level off. So at the moment, in the last 2 years, we've done 40 million per annum in pipe water renewals. That's slightly higher than was budgeted. So what we've done is we've taken opportunities where other projects have not gone forward. We've swapped around the funding between years to increase the amount of water main renewals that we've been able to do. And in 2032, we peak at about 40 million in today dollars in terms of funding. Yep.
Right, so before showing you the LTP provisions for water loss management, this is an illustration of our smart water network monitoring system and showing you how it supports our water loss management, where we now have daily night flow monitoring on our water supply zones. And again, the opportunity exists when we do rezone and introduce smaller district metered areas that the data will be more refined, more granular. This is demonstrated by the pilot DMA that we have in Rafferty, the North Rafferty area, where we've rolled out 1,000 smart water customer meters, and where the daily data shows us that the network efficiency is higher than 90%. So very, very few water losses in that area, and the water balance being managed on a daily basis. So this table demonstrates how the LTP currently supports our water loss management efforts. both in terms of capital provision and OPEX. And then to conclude, staff will continue to report on the current draft LTP indicators, but we are also required to report on the regulator's environmental performance measures. Future LTP should look at aligning our indicators with those performance measures. We will continue to improve water loss management efforts and should focus more on the high priority or the red zones. And we should be looking at allowing sufficient follow-up so that night flow monitoring can confirm successes once we have fixed the leaks. And then we are now able to definitely use our consumption data to monitor our annual non-revenue water. We also, though, need to get a handle on our unmetered connections, because then we can actually monitor annual total water losses. Thank you.
Once again, an absolutely fantastic report. Well done. It's very, very comprehensive. Thank you. Timothy.
So you're saying in the B, 2 to 4%, so 2% or less is uneconomic to look at, so it's kind of irrelevant. But do you as a unit look at the damage that's caused by the water leak to roading and footpaths? So you're not looking at it siloed, or are you? Because that has been an issue in the past and every council businesses do it. So are we looking at associated damage to water leaks, or is it purely?
At 2%, there will be limited damage
Yeah,
to
so
roads.
Not to your water, or it's other associated like paths, road.
well, where that's shown to be causing damage, we will go and repair those leaks.
Yeah.
The leak detection, when we are looking for the leaks, are those ones that we don't see, they disappear. They're the ones that are the challenging and where we have to put the effort in to locate and find. The ones at damaged road, we'll go fix. We know about them.
They find us.
Yes, correct.
So what you're saying is that sometimes it costs more to fix it than the amount of water you're going to save by the leak. If you'd never get to 100%, you'll never get there.
No, yeah, but it's just how you gauge economic.
Yeah.
And I think many people gauge that a pothole on the road is actually,
So that's the economic part, is where it's the leaks we don't see, that we go seek.
And councillor, some of those will be picked up through the balance of the renewals program, for example, where pipes are getting to the end of their life. We may not know they're leaking, but we may pick it up as a result of some of the larger works anyway.
Okay, thank you. And the second one and last one, I promise,
No, that's right.
is on page 51, sorry. At the bottom, you've got current position, real water loss. So I can't understand. I'm not the brightest, sharpest tool in the shed, but what's the difference between the yellow and the orange? Because I would have put real water loss as real water loss, but your current position. Can you explain that to me again?
As I explained, our water loss is calculated by doing night flow monitoring on 25% of our water loss zones each year. So 75% of the value of the water loss identified each year will not be current, will not be data for that particular year. It will be data for previous years.
Okay.
It's rollover data.
Okay. Thank you.
And just so I've got the right track, you're going to concentrate on the areas where there seems to be generally a little bit more leakage going on than other places. And I know full well that sometimes, say an asbestos cement pipe, you can lay it in an area which is good ground conditions and it'll last way longer than the computer says rip it out. And you've got other parts of town that the same asbestos pipe could be laid and only last half the amount of time that the life of it is. So I think you're doing the right thing. You're attacking the areas that you know that are the worst. So that's very good. Sarah?
Thanks so much for this. So, a couple of things. You've talked about the fact that you've been doing about $40 million a year, higher than budgeted, but because you've done some program swaps when other things have been delayed. Because that's program swaps, does that mean that there's now less money in that budget for future years because it needs to go back into those other projects again?
We'll address that through the LTP process.
this is the LTP process though,
So
like,
with those where we've brought program budget back in previous years,
yeah.
so LTP we've replaced.
So you've put extra budget in to replace the money. Okay. That's good. When you talk about non-critical pipes, even if they are ageing and kind of ready to go, you don't do them preemptively. That's sort of smaller residential streets, is that right?
Correct. Low
Yeah.
consequence of failure.
So smaller number of residents rather than the sub-mains and things?
Yes, yeah. It also becomes economics need to come into it. So, if we're going back somewhere and haven't done 5 repairs, it becomes more economical to go and replace that main.
Yeah.
So it's consequence of failure, but also the O&M costs that we look at.
So I get the short-term savings. If we go and repair a pipe once, maybe twice, even if you, as you say, sometimes up to 4, maybe 4 times, it's cheaper at the time than repairing the pipe. But if we just renewed the pipe to start with, we would save 4 repairs worth of costs. So in the long term, it's cheaper to repair pipes before they fail. Is that right? So, because otherwise you're paying for 4 repairs and then a fix and then a renewal.
Yeah, well, it's obviously we have to predict. It's predictive modelling. So, so there are assets out there that we know are at high probability of failure. So, like for example, Galv pipe that forms a lot of the sub-mains, which is about 20 mil, quite a small pipe. So there's a lot out there, and we are proactively replacing it. But there are times when we'll get a hybrid sticker come through to say that there's been, you've repaired the pipe on our street 3 times in the last 3 weeks. We can't get it right every time, but we are as proactive as we can be within the current framework that we work in.
Yeah. So when it comes to doing some of those assessments and things, you've got there on page 64, a capital program on track that increased OPEX would support delivery of some things. How much OPEX? I mean, I had an answer back through that said maybe 300,000 of OPEX would allow you to do more data and detection of leaks and things.
Well, that was indicating that in terms of increase in the leak detection work, which is boots on the ground seeking, looking for leaks, would be, one option could be to increase the size of that program, which was indicated at 300,000.
Okay. Because it just says TBD on the graph. But you're not recommending that we increase our leak detention. Why is that?
At this stage, we are looking to, so on the graph we are showing the high, IOL. Next one, go back. So the approach that we'll take going forward is focus on those areas that is shown up there as high priority, and so we're changing our method slightly, to, which we see as looking at those zones at high leakages. We'll work in those areas and see what the results we have in the following year, then come back in the annual plan to if we require further budget.
And I think, Councillor, the information we're getting is improving year by year with the work that Michelle's doing, and taking this new approach and targeting those high leakage index areas, and following up with the subsequent survey afterwards, just to make sure we've captured everything. I think that's going to show results, but we'll keep coming back to you and updating you as to how it's going, as to whether that shift in our focus has been effective or not.
Yeah. So do we believe that with the current capital budgets allowed for in the long-term plan, that we will get under 20% leakage rates by 2030?
Do you want to comment on the
the current budget was for a 25% leakage rate in 2030.
So I think in terms of capital budgets, I think there is a separation of leakage and capital renewal. So admittedly, those assets that we are grade 5s, there's a higher probability that they could be leaking.
Yeah.
I admit that. So I certainly can't say whether. I think the work that we're planning to do in those areas will inform us better on whether we have to increase the capital budgets on the likes of sub-main to smaller pipes that are that graph up there showing the percentage of where the percentage of leakages are coming. So that one there shows that the actual large pipes are not the bigger cause of leakages. It's the small pipes that come off those larger ones that we need to focus on.
And our first one, what we showed is better data. We really need to get the better data, and our Smart Water Network program and Smart Customer Meters is funded in the LTP.
Yeah.
So with enough time, we will be able to be in a position to become better in using what we actually do have.
And have we got the capacity to do more quickly with the water metering and making sure that all properties are metered?
I think we're doing it as fast as what we can and what the market can supply in terms of meters and in terms of contractor time.
Okay. Just so you know, it bothers me that we're here at a long-term plan as opposed to an annual plan without a plan to get us to even double the international. I mean, the international best standard stuff, even 8% is not good, right? Inefficient use of resources, leakage reduction programs. And while Taumata Arawai doesn't have that percentage leakage rate as a critical factor in its stuff, the leakage rate was one of the key things that they said to us was the reason that we weren't going to be able to get an exemption for chlorination, because our pipes are simply too cracked and leaky. So not getting to under that. Yeah. How come we didn't have this information for the draft so that we could have made different decisions?
Well, this is some work. You've seen Michelle come in here 2 or 3 times on a number of different topics from when we had the draft, and it takes quite a bit of time to put this information together.
It's a lot of work
and pulling all this information. So, yes, ideally it would have been better to have had this earlier on, but I think going forward we just need to keep coming back to council and keep you aware of where we're trending and are we being successful, because as Gavin said, then that's the time we go, actually we might need to in the future double our efforts in terms of the leak detection. Once we get past that hurdle of that bow wave of renewals by targeting those critical pipes, I think once we get that information and come back to you each year, I think we'll be in a better position.
I think the bow wave's a really interesting point. And while we look at the bow wave of renewals, that's starting in 3 years' time, is that right? Is that because that's where we've funded it as opposed to where we could be fixing them?
No, all the pipes get to the end of their life at the same time. That's the problem.
So I mean, the funding isn't necessarily when they're going to, the predictive failings don't occur. So because of the way the bow wave could be, we would be proactively replacing some pipes because we can't all replace them at the same time. So it's smoothed out.
See,
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, take the likes of cast iron pipes, and I know they're heavy, they last forever.
Yes.
Some of them have got lead joints, which causes a bit of grief as well. But when I was laying pipes, all of a sudden there's PVC coming. This is the best thing since sliced bread. This was brilliant. And within 10 years, some of that PVC was failing because it had manufacturing faults in it and stuff that we'd laid in new subdivision blown out of the ground. And when you tick it off and go, oh, we don't have to touch this for 50 years, all of a sudden you're going back to that. So there is a lot of that has gone on in the past, but I think people should fear not. It's not as if we're just sitting around waiting for a leak to come out of the ground. We're actively going out and trying to find them in zones that you know that are bad, which is great. I believe it's already well say it is 27%. I don't believe it's that. I think it's the way we're measuring it. And once we get more data and know where it's actually coming from and going to, I'm sure that 27% will come down anyway, even if we did nothing else. That's my view.
Yeah. I just have 2 small last questions. Brent, during one of the maybe FMP, when we were talking about water again, you mentioned that there were 800 priority projects that we've got, but only 500 of them are funded in the LTP. Can you
Correct.
give us a bit more information on
Yep.
that?
So the context of that is that in terms of the predictive modelling, the team look at the age, what's the age and classification, and there's a whole lot of factors on the pipes. Potentially, there's about 800 on the list, and over the 10 years, we can replace 500 of those. But that's a theoretical model. And as we've already seen in here, you've got some pipes, yes, they might be over 100 years old, but they might be cast iron and they might last 120. So it's just one of the factors that he uses. It was just I used it at that briefing just to highlight the fact that, yes, there are a lot of pipes out there, but the other work the team does in looking at all the other factors, and some of that is integration and coordination with roading programs and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So you may have a pipe, you may have a grade 5 pipe that's potentially ready to replace. You may have a grade 4 one that we need to do because we've got a roading program coming up. So the team look at the flexibility in terms of that and manage the asset. And if something does end up breaking, we have the ability to deal with it.
Okay.
It's just really, it was an indication of the size of what we deal with and what we look at.
Yeah. So this is the last one, because in the response to one of my questions that came back, it mentioned the contractors. And I'm just saying, what reporting do we get from our contractors on the condition of pipes? So while we go out and we do assessments, contractors who are out there doing work all the time will come across stuff. How do we use the information that they give us? And if they see something, do they have the capacity to say, hey, this one would need, it would be cheaper for us to do this one now than for you to come back to us in 3 years' time when it breaks again, that kind of thing?
That would be on a city care contract.
Yeah, they do collect information for us. If there's certain areas they find where pipes are in bad condition, they'll flag that to us. They'll also collect samples of some of our larger mains and send them off for testing.
And do we end up using that to say, yep, just fix it now to save us money, or?
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially, okay. And are they meeting their KPIs currently, and do we need to change the KPIs at all to raise
currently, no.
Okay,
resident satisfaction?
we've got quite a few other people. Tyrone.
Got it. Just on the economics of doing something like, take Littleton for example, right? Like if a main blows there and it's running down a road in winter, like that creates a whole new set of circumstances in terms of safety that aren't normally if it happens in Spraydon. But so what sort of how much weight do you sort of put to those kinds of conditions and to determining the economic argument?
I can't give you the specifics, but the tool we use factors in quite a number of different factors. One would be the consequence of failure, even if it's in liquefaction zone, critical customers, the number of residents affected, and obviously on the hill if it's going to fail and cause a road to be taken out on the side of the hill. So.
And I'd include Dyers Pass Road in that. That could be a catastrophe if there was water running over in winter.
Yeah. So the software we use will take that all on account and give it a weighting, and that's how we get our prioritisation put together. So that's why a 20 mil small pipe feeding a cul-de-sac would be at the bottom of the list.
Okay, but there is some weight given to those kind of
yes, there is.
Geographic factors.
Yeah.
And
So
that's good to know.
I'd expect there'll be some pipes that we replace at grade 4. Grade 4. We wouldn't let them to grade 5 because the consequence of failure is too high.
Cool. I've just got it's actually a different type of question, but just on the reporting thing. So thank you. There's quite a dense load of charts here, which is great. I'm just wondering, in terms going forward, and just given we are, as an organisation, seem to be developing our business intelligence capability and the way we reflect data back to councillors and or staff or the public. Is there a set, if you pardon the pun, in the pipeline of date reports or they call dashboards as is kind of what the general populace call them, but that's not technically correct. But about showing us like what the key areas are and whether we're improving, and like what the network's doing, just so that that's kind of like a real time, and by real time I mean like updated every few months. About the improvements and how we're going and what the sort of the critical areas are.
Our focus at this stage is very much on the data management and data cleanup related to consumption data, but yes, absolutely we would want to get there, and I think the smart water network system that we already have in place will certainly support such a dashboard. I wouldn't, all of it, however, does take time. It won't be overnight, but yes, we are certainly working on improved dashboards, improved ways of looking at the data ourselves, as well as sharing it with the community.
Right. Just one thing that I looked at in your report. It's interesting. We have people saying that we haven't had any repairs done after the earthquake, and it's terrible, and it's yada yada yada. Here we are in Rāwhiti, where it's in the heart of liquefaction country. That has got the lowest leakage because of all the work that was done there. This is very good. And is it the smart meters that the council have put in that are helping you find these little intricacies? And
I think it's likely a combination of many things. The focused pressure management that was done since 2018, that also went hand in hand with a lot of sub-main renewals. As we also saw in that other detection graph, a lot of the leaks happens at the connection points and at the sub-mains.
Yes.
So we've spent a lot of effort in renewing sub-mains in Rāwhiti, and then we are watching it on a daily basis, so to say. So it's probably a combination of all of those factors.
But it is also good that people who walk their dog or walk along the footpath see a leak and they can go click their fingers and go, wow, let's get into this, and they're being a lot more responsive. So this is good. Melanie, please.
Cool. On slide 61, the pie charts, there's a big deterioration with the mains over those 3 years, and you just talked about predictive modelling that's theoretical. But what's the modelling showing for over the next 10 years? Because that's sort of what I've been trying to ask about for quite a while. Because that's the part we can't see. This is showing us where we're at, but where are we going to get to?
I don't have the predictive modelling with me, but that's, if you look at the long-term plan budgeting, that's why there's a peak that starts to pick up. I think it's in about 4 years' time, and goes 5 years to deal with the backlog.
So is this trend that we can see here going to continue like this?
No, that's as long as we stay on course to get those, our budgets don't change. We peak up about 5 years' time. It'll continue. So that peak you'll see in the budgets is to address the backlog. So as long as we, nothing changes.
But will the backlog increase over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years?
No, that includes looking at the future backlog.
You'll also see the effect on the graphs of the sub-mains in the middle, how they've improved. So as Michelle was talking about the work in Rāwhiti, they've improved overall. Overall, they're sitting about even, but you're right. It's the mains that we need to focus on as part of the next tranche of work.
And then I've got questions about slide 64 with that table. The numbers there, these are what's in the draft LTP. I was wondering what those percentages mean in the sort of green.
So we've indicated what's in the draft LTP, the 10 years, but then we've also shown the 30-year plan. And it's the percentage of the 10 years in relation to the 30-year plan for all of those programs. So for example, smart customer meter rollout, the 17 million will be spent in the next 10 years, but that won't be it. We need to spend more after 10 years. So we funded at about 35% of what the full rollout of smart customer meters would be.
Right. And then they've got the CapEx and the OpEx separated from each other. So for example, like with the smart meter rollout, there's quite a lot there in CapEx. Well, it would be better if there was more, but there's very little in the OpEx, and the OpEx is the money that's spent to get that capital work done. So if they don't match, or
So
what does that mean?
That OpEx is really the OpEx once it's been implemented. So the cost of having smart customer meters, obviously you don't go for smart customer meters, we don't need to go read it. It comes via the network. So there will be, and as we roll out more smart customer meters, the cost of that monitoring will increase, but it's not the implementation cost of rolling it out.
Okay, and then last one is the fixing leaks line there, and it says to be determined.
That's more around, you don't know what you're going to find sometimes. You know, it could be the difference between a leaking meter that's reported through to a water main.
450 water main.
But that just does that mean that there's nothing on budget for that?
No, that's within the maintenance contract budgets.
It's not ring fenced, so that we can tell that to you right now. It's part of our contract budget. We're busy working on ring fencing the part that really just does leak repair versus the part that does maintenance. It is there, but the budgets just aren't shown separate.
Okay, Victoria, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, team. This is really technical and quite complex. Well, I'm finding it so, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert or even understand some of this, because I am actually struggling with it, and maybe a one-on-one with some of us who haven't quite grasped some of this may be helpful at a later stage. That aside, what I'm struggling to deal with today is to understand, in terms of what we're trying to achieve, where we are at in the long-term plan process. Can I just sense check what I think I'm hearing? And that is that the money that you have on budget in the current long-term plan, you as experts in what you do think that that is sufficient at this moment in order for us to keep on top of things, and that you have a plan for continuous improvement in reducing the number of our water leaks. And throwing more money at it at this stage isn't necessarily going to result in better results, because you're finding efficiencies and better ways of doing things, which is improving outcomes for us as well. If I've got that wrong, then I'm going to really need a one-on-one sooner rather than later.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so we believe we've got sufficient budget in capital. As you know, the 10-year plan shows that we are picking up, and we need in a few years have increased budget to get on top of the backlog and to keep ahead of it. In the OpEx side of things, in terms of finding leaks, we're not asking for more budget now, but there's more work to be done, particularly in those zones of high leakage, to better understand how successful we are with our approach of reducing the leakage in those areas. Now that we may, based on that work, be coming back in future annual planning process to seek more budget if we identify with the data we collect that we need to do more or do it differently.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I trust that you are experts and that you know what you're doing.
And quite happy to run a lunchtime session if people want some further training on graphs.
Okay, yeah, well, Tyrone likes graphs. We've still got 5 people. Aaron.
Yeah, I've got 3 relatively quick ones. The first one being, you had a graph up which was leaks over the years, I think. Get back the other way, I think. Next one.
Forward.
Other way, yeah, there. See how we get a couple of peaks? Are those dots at the top, are they leak rates, are they?
So the black line
Yeah.
is the percentage of leak. The top blue line is just our water consumption, our input volume. So it shows how the water demand changes over years, and shows the last 3 years the reduction in total water demand.
And then you've got you obviously got the peak there where the earthquake hit, and then all the people leave town, so demand went down, but leaks was up because the city was hit hard. Then it would appear where chlorine's introduced, the dot line goes rocketing up. Now, I'm no rocket scientist, but I can spot a lollygраф. It's just a coincidence? Oh, yeah. Right. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, just clarifying that there is just a very strong coincidence between the introduction of chlorine and the introduction of megaleaks. No, I'm not a rocket scientist.
Wasn't the chlorine
Okay.
2018?
No, 16.
Righto.
16.
Is
Yeah.
there a question
And
being
then,
answered? Sorry.
yep, yeah, so that one's answered. Then my next one is, what's the position of Christchurch water versus the rest of the country, as in our infrastructure versus how the rest of the country is looking? Because obviously there's a bigger lens on it since 2016 everywhere. How are we looking? How do we fare?
So this is the small graph, sorry, it's very small.
Yep.
I didn't necessarily want the, so the small graph shows if we look at infrastructure leakage index, and as I indicated, our average infrastructure leakage index is 4.35. It sits here
Yep.
just on the orange band. We are sitting number 6 in the country, according to the performance benchmarks of last year,
Yep,
for average ILI.
right.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And then finally, given, like Victoria said, you are the water experts, we would expect as the council that if you were alarmed or worried about the state of our infrastructure going forward, you would be saying during the LTP, hey, you guys need to put this much on. Are your recommendations putting us in a position that you're really happy with as far as our water infrastructure goes?
I'll leave that to the boss.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're happy with the direction Christchurch is drinking water that your children will drink and your parents will drink?
Well, I'm looking at it from the angle in terms of managing their assets.
Yep.
I'm happy with the program we have going forward, and as every year we are looking at that program to see whether it's fit for purpose, and with a new data, we're always getting data coming in. So there will be every year there might be some tweaks we have to make.
Yeah, it's annual plan time.
Just double checking.
In terms of smart water also, Christchurch is really the furthest ahead of everybody else. We're not necessarily marketing it, but we've done a lot, and we have a lot in the LTP to
Also, going on that, we might actually be finding more leaks than others are because we're searching harder.
I'm just talking about the monitoring the smart water network.
Right.
As
So
you
it'll
said,
get
it's a
better.
multi-pronged approach. It's a lot of aspects that need
Okay,
Cool.
thank you.
Thank you.
I need to move along. Tyler, please.
Kia ora. I know that you're focusing on the high priority zones in particular, with monitoring and obviously jumping on the asset early. But the question I've got is, if we are going to be monitoring, particularly around those higher priority zones, like the Rickedens, for example, and thank you for all your work in there, would you hypothesise that the red band that's showing up in terms of high priority is going to go up quite substantially?
The idea is that we take the red away.
Okay.
If I understand you correct. So by making sure that we've repaired the leaks in those high zones, which half of them that we've identified last year is likely repaired, we just don't know because we haven't gone back to re-monitor.
Yep.
So the focus would be to do active leakage, not just detection, because that was done, that's why it's shown as red, but to fix the leaks in that 10% of the network, retest it and not have red zones, because that would immediately bring our average ILI down quite significantly into the yellow zone.
So everything around the red zone, in particular, we're talking about the area itself, like wards, for example, streets. Would you take into account the surrounding streets that may not be monitored preemptively?
So this reflects water loss zones. Our entire city is divided into 182 water loss zones. And as I say, we monitor that every 4 years. Each zone is monitored every 4 years. But when we've identified a zone being red, focus should be on fixing leaks and re-monitoring it before the next 4 years, so that we can come back and show you that leaks in that zone has been reduced.
So we'll see the modelling for the next, say, 4 to 8 years in the next annual plan. Is that sort of
What we're trying to say is that we're wanting to show it before the next 4 years.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Samuel?
Yeah, thank you. I think Aaron, and thanks for the work on this. It's fantastic and gives me a great deal of comfort in what's being done. I just wondered, so Aaron's covered the first one, which was getting really your expert advice on the quality of the infrastructure and our asset management plan over the next 10 years, because I think that's really important. I just wondered whether, in terms of the leakage and that sort of methodology you're using, and how you're going to try and target some of the big, the big issues over the next wee while, how do we plan on communicating that with the public? Because I kind of think that's such a really tangible thing we're doing to try and get the quick wins, so to speak, to help the network, that I'd quite like that communicated. I don't know if Joss is in the room or Katie, but can we take that away? Because I think the more people understand what we're doing, hopefully they have as much confidence as you do in our system as we now do from you. So, yeah. Oh, should they? Yeah. If you can put on the front page tomorrow, that'd be yeah. Not of me, just of.
Yeah, we don't want to ruin the paper. Are you happy there, Mr. McDonald? Right, Sarah, did you ever?
Thanks so much. Can I just go back to the pie charts? Sorry, Tyrone. And Mel's question, the predictive model. So in previous LTPs, we've had similar pie charts, but with sort of the rest of the LTP. Like if we invested this much, we could get to kind of these percentages, or this is what we're expecting from the current spend. That would be over a period of time. That would be really good if we could get that ahead of decision making. You don't need to respond right now, but yeah, that's one of those things. The other thing is, in response to Mel's question, you've mentioned, and then in response to Councillor Keown's, the backlog and the fact that you're convinced that we can get rid of the backlog when that funding starts in 4 years' time. That's the next long-term plan, and up to the will of a new council. If a new council decided that there were significant pressures on the budgets, all of those kind of things, and didn't want to fund to do the backlogs, that would have a material difference to the state of our water supply. Is that right?
Well, it's have to say it wouldn't be the first time it's happened.
It wouldn't be the first time, that's right. I've seen it happen
Yes.
multiple times where councillors, every LTP, under pressure, you see where you could make cuts. If we chose to address that backlog now, we could bring some of that future funding from year 4 and 5, 6 that's supposed to deal with the backlog forward into this LTP and address the backlog that you've been talking about now if you chose. It would take a bit of planning, so maybe a little bit in year 1 and then more in year 2 and 3.
Yes, so year 1 would just more planning, but the real work would start year 2. In terms of our contractors pool, we're pretty lucky in Canterbury. We've got plenty of contractors to increase the capital program if we had to.
Yep, so we do have capacity to increase and reduce the backlog of water work if we chose to.
Great.
Thank you.
And just add into that, just in terms of the risk going forward with councils, don't forget the new legislation being passed through at the moment, the local water done well. There's likely to be a different structure of some form, which council will need to decide on in the near future as to the way forward, and that may remove some of that risk of funding being taken away, because under the legislation, the government will be requesting you to not only identify your revenue source for the water, but where the funding is going to.
But it's more likely that we'd end up subsidising other councils than the other way around. So
well, that would be a decision for this council as to how you package that up. Yeah.
Yanni.
Thanks. I was just interested if we've got funding for the going to smaller water zones still in the LTP, or whether that's been taken out. My recollection is that it's been taken out, but
there's a part of it that's still in the phase 1 and immediate rezoning, but the majority has been moved out. We are, however, still continuing with the planning that needs to be done and the designs around that, and there's funding for phase 1.
right. So from a resilience point of view and from a monitoring point of view and a safety point of view, it seemed like the research showed that, or the analysis was kind of like small water zones are a better thing for us as a city. Would that be, given what we've been going through in the recent 12 months around looking at Rāwhiti and the improvements being made, is that kind of still a fair sort of assumption to make, that that's something we should try and do?
Not just about the smaller zones, there's other reasons for that as well. It's really about more granularity of data. So you can achieve smaller zone data by doing district metered areas, and that would mean rolling out more bulk meters so that we can have continuous monitoring on smaller areas. Again, we need to plan and design that and be sure that it is cost effective and beneficial for us to do that before simply starting to roll out bulk meters. That is a costly item.
So if we wanted to do it, we still need to do a lot of planning before we would go to it. The other concern I have is just a number of the IT projects around waters seem to be in trouble. I think we've got a report tomorrow that talks about the backflow prevention IT system not being functional. We've had the big costs associated with the excess water charges. Just in terms of the smart stuff that we're doing, what sort of robustness are we putting around that investment to ensure that we're not ending up with a whole bunch of issues around very expensive IT that's not, fit for purpose?
Can't really comment on that report. I don't.
Couldn't comment.
The smart water network is based on latest technology and is really not that expensive because it's cloud-based computing.
Okay, thank you. We got to get going. Sam.
It's just one, and probably for people watching, potentially Brent, it might be a question for you. It's just around under the new legislation, and I'm just picking up your point, Gavin, around potentially things have changed investment-wise in the past. But I'm thinking about, since that has occurred, the higher oversight from the regulator, along with the prescriptive new government announcement around the need for funding and capital to be tied to each other. So I guess you can't collect money for water and spend it on libraries. And so that will be, that will just to allay anyone's concern that the risk will not be as high given the more prescriptive nature of the funding mechanism, depending on where it sits. And I guess the thing for us, and I know we haven't got to that point yet, but is around, I would certainly hope that if we're looking at this new water structure that we possibly do it, because ours works so well, actually we don't change a lot at all.
Yeah,
if anything, I'd almost like to keep Three Waters in-house rather than subsidising other regions. So there's quite a deliberate way this can be managed, which actually should give far more confidence to the community watching, because it's way more prescriptive.
Thank you very much. Once again, I'll say this is a very good report. There's a lot more focus on water than ever before. And I'd like to think that we would never, and as Sam's just said, we'll never fall into what happened in Wellington years ago where their staff were asking for money for water and it never arrived because they were spending it on other things. So the new system is going to solve that, I think. One thing that you have said, right, we've got leaks, but we're on top of it. We're going to concentrate on the two areas that we know we've got a bit of grief in and nail those down first. And so it gives me, certainly, a lot of confidence in what you're doing. Thank you very much for a good report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Now, our old favourite, GPS. Do we want to have... No, do we? No, keep going. Right. Mary's